Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and you're listening to Tales from the Triverse. This chapter is called Resonant Frequencies, and all you need to know is that over on Max Earth there's all kinds of spaceship battles going on, and elsewhere in the Triverse there is essentially rebellion upon rebellion. Earth orbit, 2550. The network was lit up across the solar system, Could Kill's message having moved every fleet ship and every outpost to high alert. The rogue AI had been found and engaged, then the signal from Could Kill had abruptly ended. The next 5 days had witnessed a series of hit-and-run attacks, first on settlements near Saturn, then occurring closer to the interior. Probably Better was on the move, disabling monitoring stations along the way, and disappearing for days before triggering another alert, each time drawing nearer to Earth. There had never been open conflict in space, with the emergence of superintelligences coinciding with the colonization of the system, and a period of peace and stability. The fleet was a combination of human-manned and automated vessels, all of which were designed primarily for law enforcement and emergency use, rather than military action. Just Enough had sent out an order for all ships within range to converge, and set up a blockade of sorts, but stopping an aggressor megaship was not something that had ever been attempted. Could Kill was disabled in some manner, something that would need looking into, and the other networked intelligences were too distant or locked in static bunkers. That left Just Enough and the fleet. The entire notion of a blockade in space was mostly farcical, and spoke more to the very human concept of the solar system, embedded culturally over centuries by simplified diagrams and off-scale representations. In reality, a theoretical aggressor did not need to go past Mars in order to reach Earth, and the planets were not aligned in a neat line. Relative orbits made for a far messier situation, and there was no getting around the fact that space was big. So big that if a ship wanted to get from point A to point B, there was very little that could be done to stop it along the way. The fleet was spread thinly around Earth, positioned to create a monitoring net more than a defensive perimeter. Sufficient early warning would enable Just Enough to relocate and intercept an approaching ship, though there were many unknowns. Could Kill's last transmission had indicated some significant damage had been done to the rogue ship, which its subsequent appearances seemed to confirm. A station on Ganymede had observed what appeared to be a damaged hull before going dark. There lingered the question of what Probably Better was doing. Its intentions were not clear. There had been no demands, no communication. There was a truism that all AI, from basic models to superintelligences, bore the fingerprints of their creators, inheriting their biases and influences. Just Enough was sufficiently self-aware to recognise their own idiosyncrasies as being traceable to the experiments of the 21st and 22nd centuries. Probably Better had been designed by those at the heart of the Joint Council conspiracy and corruption, intended as a disruptive catalyst. Built in secret, mined from materials on Palinor, smuggled through Mid-Earth's portals, and constructed in Max Earth space. Subterfuge was part of its core design. Its programming had prompted it to pursue the SDC detectives after the museum heist, seemingly determined to prevent them from leaving with the stolen journals. When confronted by its own creator, Probably Better had destroyed the New Road station and killed Charles Matheson. As a chaotic injection, it was certainly fulfilling its role. Events on Mid-Earth and Palinor had been triggered, with Just Enough's SDC friends executing their part of the plan. Communication with Mid-Earth's London was difficult at best, though some messages had been successfully smuggled out to territories beyond British control. Detective Burhane in Addis was reliable as ever. The Atlantic station remained under the control of the Palinese rebels, though most of their forces were now engaged in an assault on the Brulia city-state. All that remained was Max Earth and its pesky loose end. It was really quite embarrassing. An AI had been the root of so many problems. Just Enough and the network in general had not a little pride in maintaining a stable human society for multiple centuries. That it had almost unravelled so rapidly was a reminder that no amount of compute could account for every eventuality. There was never enough data to entirely predict what was to come. Still, it fell to Just Enough to resolve the not insignificant issue of a rogue, possibly insane superintelligence. They had a role, and they would execute it with customary precision. When the missiles were detected, they were already close enough to catch part of the fleet in their blast radius. They must have launched a huge distance away, hundreds of thousands of kilometres at least, and drifted until ready to strike. Their missile engines lit up simultaneously, a wall of fire igniting and spreading tendrils across space. Interceptors flared, taking out most of the incoming fire, but just enough registered impacts on multiple fleet ships. Through the hole created by the chaos moved a megaship, its black shape invisible to the naked eye against space, but the reignition of its Archimedes drive lighting up like a beacon to just enough sensors. The fleet would look after itself. Pursuing probably better could only be done by another megaship. The second conflict between the superintelligences in a week after centuries of calm. Calling in assistance from unmanned drone ships in the assembled fleet, just enough turned and burned after probably better. The rogue AI was on a trajectory towards Earth with an unknown purpose. The drone ships would help to neutralise any potential ground attack, and the major cities had their own defences. The space elevator was the weak point, and if the ship attempted to sever the cord or any of the 3 anchors, it had the potential for catastrophe. Security had been improved since the bombings, but there were few contingencies to stop a determined megaship. It had not been considered a serious threat outside of science fiction. Better able to assess probably better from the closer range, just enough could indeed detect numerous impact scars on their hull, presumably the result of their run-in with Could Kill. Weapons systems had been targeted, which would reduce probably better's capacity for aggression, especially having already fired a significant portion of its arsenal at the fleet. Not that it was without recourse. A cloud of mines dropped from its hull, thousands of tiny explosives dispersing into the vacuum between the 2 megaships, just enough targeted and disabled as many as possible, and ordered the drones to do the same, threading a safe route as detonations buffeted them on all sides. The Earth loomed ahead, probably better showing no sign of slowing down. Just enough continued to run simulations of potential actions and reactions. If the megaship chose to self-terminate by impacting on the surface, it had the potential to create an asteroid-level shockwave that would upend the planet's atmosphere and generate continent-scale tsunamis. Just enough fired a cluster of nukes, noting with some satisfaction that the launch tubes functioned at all. They had never been used. The other ship launched countermeasures, and the missiles exploded at a distance, but it was nevertheless useful to further assess probably better's capabilities. Other than the minefield, there was little in the way of aggressive actions. They could keep running, but taking down just enough didn't seem to be a priority. There was a shift in trajectory, which suggested that a direct surface impact was not the intention. Plotting the course suggested several possible interception sites, if probably better was indeed attempting to reach ground level. It was a curious tactic. Climbing back out of the gravity well would be harder and slower, and make it easier for just enough in the fleet to capture the megaship. Buffeted by atmospheric re-entry, just enough maintained position, within visual range of probably better but far enough away to evade potential hazards. The drone ships were not designed for atmospheric manoeuvring, and remained in low orbit, long-range weaponry still targeted on the fast-moving enemy ship. The trajectory possibilities were narrowing, as probably better began to reduce speed through atmospheric drag. It was evidently balancing a need to slow down with staying one step ahead of just enough. Catching the other ship was possible, but not without maintaining such speeds as to put the surface settlements at risk. Stopping probably better at the expense of a city would be counterproductive. London was the likely destination, considering the trajectory. Just enough fired its railgun, hoping to push the other ship off target. Timed just right, they might overshoot and crash land in the North Sea instead. While probably better's offensive capabilities seemed reduced, it was still more than able to dodge and counter incoming fire. This was perhaps the problem with centuries of peace and assumed benevolence. Far too little contingency for chaotic behaviour. Taking down a megaship was non-trivial, especially within a populated area. They were whipping across the Atlantic, plumes of water spraying into the air in their wakes. Land came into view, the southwest of Britain, and still just enough was unable to formulate a strategy for disabling the other ship without causing an unacceptable collateral damage. They were slower now, moving at the speed of jets, their sonic booms alerting the humans living below. London rose on the horizon, and just enough could do little but watch as Probably Better descended, skating along the Thames, the black corrugated bulk of its hull unconcerned by the boats and bridges it obliterated. Taking a turn, the megaship slowed yet further, and just enough saw an opportunity. Extending docking clamps, they moved in from above, attempting to lock onto the other ship. A successful connection would make it possible to commence a direct physical hack and lift the ship back into orbit, where the fleet could secure it. Just Enough's predictions had not considered the other ship diverting from the river and burrowing into the streets, demolishing buildings as it went, grinding down into the tarmac and underground train tunnels and sewers, ploughing a furrow towards the portal station nestled below it. Just Enough stayed above street level, observing, running the numbers, unable to compute a reasonable explanation, as Probably Better scythed its way through the portal station, down through the concourse, into the cargo area below ground, and then forced its way through the lone functioning portal to mid-Earth. London, mid-Earth, 1980, July. The control room monitors flared one by one, then went dark. Golding gripped the desk as the room shook violently and the lights flickered. Walpole struggled to retain his balance as the floor shuddered and the two bound security officers cried out. "We just lost every camera feed," Golding said, tapping at the controls but getting no response. There was an ongoing low rumble underfoot and on every surface, and the sound of scraping metal. What was that? A bomb? Walpole reached out to steady an empty coffee mug that was vibrating its way to the edge of the desk. A crack snaked its way across the ceiling. "Staying here might not be an option," Golding said. Yannick Clark was standing on the north side of the Thames, watching the bridges, waiting for the government's reinforcements from Panlore to arrive. It was a risk, and they'd all be in danger, but drawing those forces away from Panlore was vital if Lola and her team were to reach the university and execute the plan. All around was a mass of people, making their way slowly, noisily, bodily towards Westminster and the seat of government, humans and Koth and Ainfa marching together. He was watching the South Bank, looking towards the portal station and the Joint Council Tower, when an explosion erupted from the streets. Smoke billowed up, enveloping the portal station and the base of the tower. From his vantage point he couldn't see what had happened. "Did you see?" he asked, turning to Varco. The Koth's eyes narrowed and they waved to Gankrin. "Send a couple of fast flyers," Varco ordered. "We need to know what's just happened." Brulia 3208, Bright Sun. Moving swiftly, Lola dropped from her hiding place in a raised alcove of the university and landed next to the robed guard, knocking him off his feet. Placing both hands on his face, she allowed his wielding ability to flow into her, the man's face turning ashen and veins throbbing on his temples. The spell that he had been in the process of casting, ice blades that had been forming on both of his arms, shattered to pieces. The plan was working beyond what Lola had dared to hope. They'd managed to get onto the university campus undetected. Anyone who had seen them had been dealt with and would not be sounding the alarm. They were nearly at the reconstructed tower that had been built to commemorate Cainamore's many achievements as head lecturer. This area of the campus served a dual purpose as the Brulian portal station, with part of the grounds looking more like Max Earth architecture. An oddly modern port sitting anachronistically among the ivory and stone towers of Fountain University. Only the portal to London functioned, with the second inactive oval hovering above a garden dedicated to those who had perished during the joining. Cainamore's tower was positioned between the two portals. Once they were at the top, in approximately the same position as the wizard's old laboratory, Yana would be able to begin. She flexed her arms, the tingle of magic coursing through her system. Not having used magic offensively since the attack on the Atlantic station, it was a thrill. The guard had been an elementalist, attuned to cold, and she marvelled at the ice crystals forming on her skin, perfectly comfortable to her own touch, but potentially deadly to anyone else. They had stepped out onto the open courtyard leading to the tower when the portal station exploded. She hadn't been looking in that direction, so was only aware of the sound, louder than anything she'd ever heard, and the rush of wind, the tremors beneath her feet, and then the shower of debris filling the air as the station fragmented. Yana cried out with a sudden effort as she instinctively raised a force field, then expanded it to include the rest of them, and then found herself having to hold it while the destruction continued to rain down upon them. An enormous black shape erupted from the ruins of the station, emerging from the portal itself, now revealed to the open air, a leviathan black and twisted, undulating fibres glistening in the afternoon sun, barrelling through the campus, knocking out the feet of Kanamor's tower. Still it kept sliding, digging a furrow in the campus grounds, tearing up the parkland and crushing building after building as if they were made of sand. Rock and dust and what had been structures and desks and stages and benches thudded into the ground, impacting invisibly on Yana's protection. She dropped to her knees, arms still raised up. Maxim joined her, providing assistance in the form of a flaming wall that sliced the larger incoming dangers into smaller, less dangerous pieces. "What is it?" Pilpa was crouched with her hands over her head. The black oblong came to rest in a crater of its own making, entirely inert, while the university continued to crumble around it. "I've seen it before," Lola said. "It's a megaship from Max Earth." Slava stepped forwards, squinting through the distortion of the force field and the dust and the smoke beyond. "How is it here? Why?" "It's dead," said Lola. "They can't function here. It must have been a mistake, an accident." Megaships all looked similar to human eyes, and Lola had no way of knowing which this was, but a tightening in her gut, a fear gripping at her mind, a pressure behind her eyes, told her that this was the rogue AI. Perhaps Justin had been able to force it through the portals, sending it here to deactivate, to be drained of all power as its reactor shut down. Before they could react, there was a ripple, a shimmer of energy that pulsed out across the devastated courtyard, and a low noise like a whale in the deep. Then the ship shifted, moved, debris and dust falling from its hull as it ascended, lifting up and away from the university grounds. Up it went, moving towards the city, a harbinger of something terrible. Thanks for listening. You can leave comments, subscribe, and find lots more over at simonkjones.substack.com.